Hi guys, Fla'nel here, and welcome on the first making of about a costume on this channel. This one is for Evelynn if you didn't guess it with the title or the thumbnail. And my first comment will be, my god, I respect people doing that on a regular basis so much now. I'm so not used to filming my process while making a costume, and I don't like being stopped while in the middle of something. This was truly a whole new experience for me. So first of all, you can thank Kaz for putting up with me being grumpy when she had to stop me while I was doing something, and keeping up with my absolute atrocious habit of making my costume up until 3 AM. I'm truly sorry, Kaz. Now that it's said, let's go back to the video. So, as I was saying earlier, this is the video about the making of my Evelynn cosplay from League of Legends. Or should I say KDA now? I don't know. Still, I did the version of the Baddest of Evelynn, and I'm here to go through the whole process with you. I decided to divide the whole thing in 4 videos, 3 about the costume itself and 1 longer for the wig. This is the first video, and for this one we are focusing on the dress and shoes. At the time I only had this pic as a reference for the costume, so everything is based on this illustration, at least for the dress. The wig and clothes were another fight. So starting with the dress, the first thing for me was to go through the little details, since it's quite a simple one, so a lot of the effect revolves around details. The details here are the theme on the collar, the 4 other ones on the belt, the fact that the front parts are actually divided in 2, and those things on the sleeves, which I couldn't tell if they were the sleeves rolled up, a piece of fabric put like this, or just a seam. The fact is that in videos released after I finished the costume, it was clear that they were only seams, but the costume was already done and I went with roll-up sleeves. But you'll see that later. So first of all, even though the fabric seemed to be something like fake leather or something shiny, I prefer to choose comfort over accuracy for this one. I chose some black jersey fabric. It's really stretchy and I just love this fabric, so I went with it to feel at ease in the costume. That was the most important thing for me. I'm quite messy when I create my patterns, since I always create them thanks to my own daily clothes. This time I used this red coat to create my patterns. I drew them on paper before placing them on my fabric. Fabric that I folded into since the dress is symmetrical, so left and right side are exactly the same, so same pattern and same pieces of fabric. Once that was done, I traced all the patterns on my fabric, including the pattern of the boots. And as you can see, they are not exactly done the same way as the dress. Not wanting to buy a new pair of boots, I decided to cover those shoes that I already had, and in order to do it, I've wrapped my leg in the shoe in cellophane. Wrapping my leg in the cellophane was just the first step, so that I can then wrap it entirely with tape. Once it's done, I just had to draw lines where I wanted the pattern to be and cut it the whole thing in order to release my leg from the tape prison. And just like that, I had my 2 patterns ready to be used. So back to the fabric and the patterns on it. Since they were all drawn, I then pinned together the part of the fabric being on top and the one being under, following the patterns to be sure that they wouldn't move while I cut it. And then I ended up with those beautiful patterns. So here you have the pieces for the boots, the 2 front pieces including the other side of the collar, and the back parts, each of them doubled as you've understood. Those little baby parts here are the ones that are going to match the back pieces, aka the inner part of the collar. The biggest advantage of the back pieces here is that they are ready to be sewed together when cut like this. Those 2 front parts will be fused to become one, and this part here, being the inner part of the collar for the front, will go right there. Note that here the base of the collar is included in the front parts of the dress, so no need to make front piece for the collar. Same thing for the back. And basically the shoe patterns go just like that together. Now I just had to sew all those pieces. I went for quite solid stitches here, mostly to keep the fabric from fraying, even though jersey is one of those fabric that doesn't fray easily. This is what it looks like when all the pieces are together. It looks like this from the inside, and as you might have guessed, I sewed the front and back parts together. I mean, that's obvious for me if you want to wear the dress, but I don't know, maybe it's not obvious for some of you, so I'm still saying it, okay? Also, if some of you don't know, this is what it looks like when the color is assembled. No seams visible, and as you can see right here, this is where the fabric of the color stops inside of the dress. And I also didn't forget about the seam that is visible, even though it's just a decorative one. Oh, and those pins are here to indicate where I'm going to sew both parts of the front of the dress, so it won't keep opening at each movement I'm making. To put those, I had to put the dress on me to see if everything was going smoothly. As you can see, I just had to tighten the back part that was a bit too loose. Don't hesitate to do that often if you're doing your own costume, so you won't have bad surprises at the end of the road. Next part was the sleeves, and as you can see, I used my coat again to create the pattern. Then cut the fabric, and this is quite visible, but I tend to make my patterns bigger than they should be. You can cut the fabric if there's too much, but it will be difficult to add some if there's not enough of it. So I ended up with something like this and just added them to the rest. Pinning sleeves is a painful thing for me to do. They always give me a hard time, but for once they were not that difficult to manage, so that was a victory. Once sewed to the rest of the costume, they look like this. During the process, I also completely forgot about the whole rolled apart thing, so I just added a bit of fabric at the bottom of each sleeve. Not the cleanest thing to do, but except the people watching this video, this will be hard to notice if I'm not explicitly showing it. And it gives the effect that I wanted, so I consider this as a good save. Most of the dress was now done, so I went back to the shoes. I pinned those two pieces of fabric together and then tried it to make the adjustments needed directly on my leg. And this was the result. Now that I was satisfied, I sewed the pieces of fabric together and made a hem at the top of it, and glued the fabric for the hole where the heels go through because it was easier for this part than sewing it. I repeated the process a second time, and here are my beautiful boots. By the way, if you intend to go at a con with those or to shoot outside, think about gluing a piece of foam or a strong piece of leather under your shoe. This will prevent the fabric to end up entirely destroyed. Let's take care of the belt now. I used the exact same technique as with the shoes. I wore the dress on me, put the cellophane and drew on the tape where the belt was supposed to be. I cutted it, and with the pattern, I cutted a piece of 3mm EVA foam to have the base of the belt. With that, I put fabric glue on the foam, which is quite similar to neoprene glue, and then I glued it on the piece of fabric using the same fabric as for the dress. Once glued, I cut it around it, leaving approximately 3 cm around the edges. I glued it to the other side of the foam piece, leaving the foam apparent so it will be easier for me to glue the velcro that will be the thing to hold the slashers. Because yeah, I haven't told this before, but the belt will be the thing holding the tentacles thingy to the costume. I made the belt a bit larger to be sure those would actually fit. And if you're watching this because you want to do the costume but don't intend on making the slashers, you can just close the belt with rubber bands, or you can use another piece of velcro so you can close it. I then sewed the aesthetic seam that we've talked about sooner, using the marker on my sewing machine to keep an equivalent distance all the time. And like that, my beautiful belt was done! And well, my dress was mostly finished. I just added this little thing to keep the belt from going anywhere, plus it was on the reference picture, and I added this little fake pocket. I also sewed the hem at the bottom of the dress and later added the ring and chain. And yeah, this is what the dress ended up looking like. Truly, this was the easiest part for me to do, sewing being my strongest point with wig styling. The slashers were a whole other adventure, but we'll see that in the next video that should be up next weekend. So love you all and see you next time!